Hello, BookTube. Welcome back to my 2025 library tour. In this episode, more history. The first book is a return to Judith Herron, who we saw yesterday with her book Byzantium. This is her book on the city of Ravenna. Ravenna, capital of empire, crucible of Europe. So this is a history of Ravenna from the end of the Western Roman Empire through to its incorporation into an Italian kingdom, like one of the Italian kingdoms, I think, from like one of the Lombards or something like that. I had to go at this book a few years ago, didn't get on with it, and then came back to it, I think, for my first Bell Redemption December, and it turned out good. I came to rather like the book, although I have not revisited it since. Now, the next few books on this shelf are actually ones that I have intended to get rid of. For a few months, I had a number of these books in piles waiting to be boxed up in a donation box of doom. However, as I began to rearrange things and got the two new bookcases, these books were put back on the shelves. And since science fiction and fantasy are mostly populating the donation boxes of doom, these books get a reprieve. Maybe. We'll see. So first up is The First Kingdom, Britain in the Age of Arthur by Max Adams. So this is a history of England from the end of the Roman occupation through the Anglo-Saxon invasions and Anglo-Saxon England. Not very good. It did nothing for me. It kind of was more reminiscent of a PBS special or something. I also did not particularly get on with Lost Paradise, the story of Grenada by Elizabeth Drayson, which isn't so much a history of Grenada as much as it is a tourist book, I guess. I did not like this at all. This is Vanguard, How Black Women Broke Barriers, Won the Vote, and Insisted on Equality for All by Martha S. Jones. This is a really good look at African American women's struggle for the vote. It was shortlisted or a finalist for the Kundal History Prize one year, I think. It was quite good. Revolution in the Air, 60s Radicals Turn to Lenin, Mao, and Che by Max Album. This was pretty good. It's a look at political revolutionaries on the left in the 1960s. Surprised I managed to read it because it is quite technical, although I do not see myself ever revisiting this book. And I'm not really particularly interested in radical revolutionary politics. The Husband Hunters, American Heiresses Who Married into the British Aristocracy by Anne de Coucy. So, this is a look at various wealthy American women whose in a hunt for respectability in the U.S., which they could not get. Well, okay, so for the most part, you have in the United States, there was at this time an unofficial aristocracy centered in New York, whose families were there for centuries, and they controlled New York high society for centuries. And it was very difficult to get yourself into that society if you were newly rich, or even a few generations newly rich. So the only way for many of these aspiring women to get into American high society was to marry their daughters into European aristocracy, because it's kind of hard to ostracize or treat as pariah the mother-in-law of a duke or an earl or a prince. And many of the husbands, while not as ambitious, were kind of, there's this cult of sort of spoiling as much as how some of these things turned out, their wives and children. So it's an interesting book. Some of these marriages were happy, most of them were miserable. And the reason why this book was one of those that I was going to get rid of is that there's a scene in one of the chapters that I found very off-putting, and I want to get rid of it for that reason. Although it is a very fascinating book. Game of Queens, The Women Who Made 16th Century Europe by Sarah Griswold. So this is a book about women in power in the 16th century. And there were quite a few women in power in the 16th century, from a sister of an aunt of a Holy Roman Emperor who was the long-term governor of what is now the Netherlands, to, of course, Mary and Elizabeth, Catherine de' Medici, but I never really got on with this book. I also did not get on with Bad Mexicans, Race, Empire, and Revolution in the Borderlands by Kelly Lytle Hernandez. So this is a book about some of the anti-Diaz voices who migrated to the United States and were sort of instrumental in sort of working on bringing about Diaz's downfall in the early 20th century, while the officials in the United States were trying to prop up Diaz. Did not really like this book when I read of it. The Making of a King, Antigonus Gonatas of Macedon and the Greeks by Robin Waterfield. So this is a slim biography of Antigonus Gonatas, who founded the Antigonid dynasty in Macedonia, which ruled until the Romans annexed the Macedon. It's interesting. I read it, a bit too technical. Probably will never read it again. The Last Kings of Macedonia and Their Triumph of Rome by Ian Worthington. So this is basically the end of Macedonia's story once it was conquered by Rome. Did not get on with this book. Empire of the Black Sea, The Rise and Fall of the Mithridatic World by Duane W. Roller. So this is a history of Pontus, most particularly its final king, Mithridates the Sixth or something. It's interesting. I liked it. I didn't love it. I think it could have been better. But I think it's been in my library a bit too long. Time to send it on its way. When I get the opportunity to do so. The Chinese Question, The Gold Rushes in Global Politics by Mei Ngai, or Njai. So this is a look at the Chinese diaspora in the United States, Canada, I believe, and Australia, and also South Africa. Did not make much headway into the book. It was shortlisted for the Kindle History Prize a few years ago, and was one of those books that were on the half that I did not get on with. The Emperor and the Elephant, Christians and Muslims in the Age of Charlemagne by Sam Otwell Soulsby. So this is a look at international relations and the system of gift-giving in the mid-medieval period. Not terribly good. The Chinese in America by Iris Cheng. So this is a history of Chinese Americans. Quite good. Papyrus, The Invention of Books in the Ancient World by Irene Vallejo, translated by Charlotte Whittle. Despite what the book says, the title says, and The Invention of Books in the Ancient World, that's not really what this book is about. This book is weird. It's a very personal meditation on books. And I could have sworn I got rid of this book last year. But somehow it stuck around. Although I did kick it out of my library, so I probably should physically kick it out of my library. Against the World, Anti-Globalism and Mass Politics Between the World Wars by Tara Zara. This was long listed for last year's Kindle History Prize, I think, and I decided to pick it up. I occasionally get a strong desire to participate to varying degrees in the Kindle History Prize, as well as other book prizes, but it's usually deeper with the Kindle. And so I picked this up, didn't like it, and I want to get rid of it. The Chile Project, The Story of the Chicago Boys and the Downfall of Neoliberalism by Sebastian Edwards. So this is the history of how some economists from the University of Chicago ruined Chile in the 70s and 80s and 90s. Voodoo and Power, The Politics of Religion in New Orleans, 1881 to 1940 by Cody A. Roberts. Have not gotten around to this book yet. It's not necessarily, I think, what I wanted it to be, though. Thebes, The Forgotten City of Ancient Greece by Paul Cartledge. So this is a history of the Greek city-state Thebes, from its origins to its destruction by Alexander the Great to its reconstruction centuries later. The mythological Thebes and archaic Thebes are very interesting, but once the history gets to the Peloponnesian War, I get a lot of been there, done that with this book. And I ultimately did not care for it. Not entirely sure why I still have it. 1177, The Year Civilization Collapsed by Eric H. Klein. So this is a book about the Bronze Age collapse back in 1177 BC, BCE, however you want to define that term, that time. So part of the book is a history of the late Bronze Age, which is very fascinating, and another part of the book is theorizing what factors created the conditions that led to the Bronze Age collapse. And the other part is about the archaeology of the period and of discovering the causes that led to the various theories, which were a number of factors. I'm of mixed opinions about 1177. I like the history of the late Bronze Age. It's quite good. The theorizing and the archaeology parts of it, I'm not as fond of. Rural Nostalgia, A Backwards History of Britain by Hannah Rose Woods. Have not gotten around to this yet. Been meaning to. And Royal Renegades, The Children of Charles I and the English Civil Wars by Linda Porter. Again, I have not gotten around to this book yet. So that concludes this shelf. And maybe I need to go see if I can find a library box of Doom for some of these. Anyway, BookTube, I will be back shortly with a tag video, and then tomorrow I will be finishing off this bookcase as part of the 2025 library tour focusing on history. And then I'll be back with weekly reads. And then I may go ahead and film my February reading plans, although I will upload that on Saturday. So I might have a outfit change on Saturday between the two videos, because I will also be working on the library tour. End of BookTube. Until I see you next time, thank you, have a great afternoon, and stay safe.